So, from Preston to Finse, let's talk about going to Hoth.
Right, so I'm absolutely delighted to say that one of our hosts tonight had actually been to Finse, which is where I went to last year, and I'm sure he had an absolutely amazing experience, probably completely different from the one that I had. So Andy, take us through the weekend, but I want you to take it nice and slowly, start off on Friday and tell us about your journey to Finse and what happened that day.
Yeah, thanks, Rich. Yeah, it was an absolutely amazing time. Really, really good. So glad I did it. I actually started on Thursday. We flew Thursday afternoon Gatwick to Oslo and stayed overnight at an airport hotel. Nice early start on the Friday. Had to get the train then from the airport into Oslo Central and change trains there to pick up the Bergen train, which stops off at Finse. It's the only way to get there. There's no roads, no air traffic. You've got to take the train or you don't get there. Knew we were in the right place because waiting on the platform there were quite a lot of the blue and orange crew coats, the Columbia reissues. So it was nice to know that you're amongst fellow fans. Train journey itself was a 4-hour trip. Sounds a long time, but the scenery is so spectacular. You're just pressed up against the window the whole time. You're taking photographs, taking video. Loads of snow, lakes and mountains, just spectacular scenery the whole way. So really, really good journey. We arrived in Finse just after lunchtime. Off the train, met Gus getting off the train. So said hi to him. And had a little look round, done a little bit of homework before we went in terms of getting some photographs from behind the scenes shooting and what have you. And immediately you're there, you're spotting bits of the hotel, bits of background, bits of the railway station that appear in some of these crew photos. So really exciting knowing that you're there in Hoth. Went into the hotel, got checked in, and the first thing that grabs you is the view out the window from the reception area. Again, you're looking across the frozen lake, you're looking at the mountains beyond the glacier. It is just It's just Hoth. It's straight out of the movie, absolutely breathtaking. And you know yourself, Rich, the views just from the back of the hotel are just breathtaking. Went down and found our room. And again, you've got movie history all around you. From our room, we were looking out the side of the hotel, so we didn't have all of that lovely view out the back. But from the side, you're looking across to what I think is the youth hostel. We've got old cast and crew photos, aerial photographs showing that just in front of the youth hostel building is where they'd got the little tent village set up. So the tents that were put up on a temporary basis to house paint shop and workshop and to store some of the props and equipment, the hangar for the helicopter, some of the rebel gun turrets are in these photos, and that was just outside our window. Looked straight out, and that's where all that was happening. So yeah, just superb to be so immersed in all that lovely Star Wars history. We had a little bit of time to kill after we checked in, so went up in the bar area, as I say, having a look out the window, enjoying the view, and we noticed in a cabinet behind the bar, they'd got one of the Rebel Trooper helmets or caps, one of the cloth headgear that the Rebel troops wore, so being a little bit cheeky, asked if we could get that out and have a little look at that, which they were only too happy for us to do, so even got to try those on, have a few photos. That was fantastic. Booked the dog sled for the Saturday morning, which we'll come on to in a bit. And by that time, we'd met up again with Gus, with Chris Dragulius, some of the other guys that were there. And we went down out of the hotel, got our cold weather gear on, went out onto the frozen lake looking for filming locations. And we managed to spot some of the areas where they'd filmed different scenes out on the frozen lake. Some of the scenes towards the end of the battle where you've got the rebel troops retreating through the billowing smoke on the battlefield and lots of debris. Some of the shots where rebel troops are running along and the snow speeders coming past in the background. There's, I think, shot where Luke is lifted up to the belly of the Atta. That was actually done by a helicopter shot lifting up a stuntman. That was also filmed out there. So with some of these photographs that we'd taken with us, we were able to match up the rocks in the background and see exactly where these shots were taken from. So that was brilliant, really exciting experience. Back to the hotel. In the evening, we had a talk from a guy called Christian Berrum. He was one of the Norwegian crew, and he gave a great talk on some of their experiences shooting. And then after that, we had dinner, and they laid on some lovely food for us. and just sort of socialising, just getting to know the other guests, people there from all over the world. There were obviously some Norwegians, some local guys, people from the States. Met a guy from Romania, Germans, Mexican chap, some other Brits, lots of people we'd never met before, but made lots and lots of friends over there. Everybody's there for the same thing. Obviously, everybody loves Star Wars. Everybody's there for the Hoth experience. Social side really, really good. And that concludes the Friday.
Well, I know you've got some recordings from the time, Andy, so I think this will be a great time to cut over to the recording that you've got, which is a brief introduction by the Hoth Kit Monson.
If you haven't met me before, I went around and said hello to everybody. My name's Kit. I am in charge this year, taking over just for a little bit. And we're pretty much going to continue the same thing. I just have some practical information for you guys. So the weather nowadays is going to be beautiful weather tomorrow. Again, this is the mountains in Norway, so things can change very, very fast. But tomorrow is the nice weather day. And for those of you who are planning to go on excursions on your own and out, it will get bad tonight. So please make sure you're back before dark, because the wind will pick up and become very strong. It's going to be about -11 tomorrow, so make sure that you are well dressed. And if you guys are going to go on to the Han Solo Rock, where you'll be left behind, the Huskies are going to go back to Finse 1222 and pick up the next group, so you're going to be alone out there for about 25 minutes. And then the Huskies will exchange and take you back. So when you're out there, make sure you're dressed warm in windproof gear, but just make sure that when you're out there, run around in the snow, take your pictures, and you'll stay warm. And then on Sunday, we're really going to experience how it was to film up here. It's going to snow, it's going to have a lot of wind, so you're really going to go outside and get those pictures where you're holding your hat, maybe leaning against the wind. So we're going to have a great visit Hoth this year, weather-wise.
Okay, awesome stuff there, Andy. So Saturday then, one of the things I was particularly taken by was how they seem to operate on a completely different time zone to the rest of the world, and quite often they were up at 2, 3, 4 in the morning whilst we were all trying to get some kip. Was it similar over there, or was it everybody sensible and up bright and early for breakfast?
Yeah, I think most people were sensible. I mean, certainly we were up early because we'd booked a dog sled for 9 a.m. So we had to get up and go and get our breakfast, get all our cold weather gear on. And then to get out to some of the other locations, we'd hired snowshoes, so needed to go up to the ski shop to collect the snowshoes. So quite a lot to do before we picked up the dog sleds at 9 o'clock. But quite a few people around in the breakfast area. One of the waiters had dressed up in a rebel Hoth trooper outfit, so that was fantastic. He was serving, and he was clearing the plates away, and I had a bit of banter with him, so that was great. And then out to the dogs. So they were running 3 teams of dogs, and each team can take 1 or 2 people. Basically, you've got one person who's driving, who stands on the skids behind the sled, and then somebody sitting in it. So the guy who was leading it was driving the front sled with 1 passenger, and then stupid people, they actually let us have a go. 1 sitting in, 1 driving the sled for the other 2 dog teams. So we had about a 30-second briefing on how to drive these things. Not me, I was a passenger, so my friend Jeremy was in behind driving the thing, and very, very brief introduction, and off we went. Dogs seemed to have a bit of a mind of their own, so they knew where they wanted to go. They weren't really paying much attention to what direction we were trying to steer them in. Went over a bit of a bump, and sled turned over and was getting dragged along for a little bit, so a guy had to come back and sort us out and pick us up again. Off we went again. Same thing happened again. Not that I'm blaming Jeremy's driving, but it was a little bit of a rough start to our dog sledding experience. But after we'd got past the rough ground, that was all right, and went off, and that was a lovely experience, going across over the snow and ice, and looking out at the scenery, and with the dogs puffing and panting in front, and that was really good. That trip took about 10 minutes, and that took us out to the Han Solo Rock. So that was the first stop. Dog sleds would normally leave you there. They would go back to the hotel, pick up the next people to come out, come back, pick you up. So the idea was you'd have about 20 minutes, half an hour at Han Solo Rock and then go back to the hotel. But we wanted to go on and see some of the other locations. So we only went one way on the dog sleds. We did our photos at Han Solo Rock. I'd put myself together a little Han Solo Hoth costume, so got some photos with my costume on. I'd also bought some action figures, so got Han Solo and the Probot set up, so got some photos, lined all the shots up perfectly with the movie stills. Again, just unbelievable to think you're actually there, you're on location, you're where Harrison Ford was there, and Peter Mayhew and all the crew guys. Just magical experience, just unbelievable to think you're actually there. The next location that we were going to was the actual battlefield location, which was quite a hike away. We didn't realise quite how far it was, but we set off with our snowshoes. Not along a trail. We could see where we were going. It was beautiful weather, actually. We were so lucky with the weather. Although the paths are marked, we were quite okay to go off and forge our own route up there. Could see quite clearly where we were going. Long way, as I say, very tiring walking in the snowshoes. Got up to a little mountain rescue hut, which is just below the glacier, where we stopped and had a bit of lunch. Sandwiches are actually frozen in the backpacks, which was quite an experience. I wouldn't say we felt particularly cold because we'd got all the warm weather gear on. We'd got the ski socks and the base layer and the salopettes and all the warm clothing. So it wasn't uncomfortable at all. But it was quite an eye opener that your sandwiches had actually frozen. Went on then up to the battlefield location. We heard from a guy on skis coming back down, saying that the weather was beginning to close in. He reckoned that it was going to start snowing quite seriously in a couple of hours' time. So we did have a bit of a discussion. Do we press on? Do we not? Very, very glad that we did make the effort to get up there. Once you're up on the top, it's immediately obvious where you are. Again, it's a location that we've all seen so many times in the movies and on the behind-the-scenes shots. You could very, very easily pick out where the trenches were. We found the location where the Probot would have come down, not where that shot was filmed from, because that was taken from some distance away, but the Probot actually lands in that same area. We found the little hill where Luke sees the Millennium Falcon take off at the end of the Hoth battle. So we all got our shot, again, replicating the movie scenes, and I got my action figures out, set up a little trench scene in the snow, and got some photos there. Really, really good. Fantastic experience again. A couple of guys, again, dressed up as rebel troopers who'd come up with us, and got some shots with them. And after that, it was time to make our way back. Took it slowly and made our way back to the hotel, but quite glad when we finally got over the last ridge and we could see the hotel across the frozen lake. Got back to the hotel, did a few more location spots around the hotel. It's quite amazing, quite an eye-opener, how much filming was actually done around the building. And again, from the behind-the-scenes images we'd taken, we could see where where the Wampa was set up. We could see where they'd done the scenes with Han Solo and Luke and the dead Tauntaun, putting Luke in the belly of the Tauntaun. We could see where they'd filmed in the really bad weather, where they'd literally just pushed Mark Hamill out the door of the hotel and filmed him from inside. Found those locations and those doors, and again, lots and lots of shots. We were able to line up and find out exactly where those had been. Back into the hotel, we had another talk then from a lady called Madeline Most, who'd been an assistant cameraman on The Empire Strikes Back. She got a chap called Jeff Glover, who again was a cameraman, to join in on Skype. So great to hear from him. That led us up to dinner. Again, lovely meal, good company. And again, very lucky that during that meal we had Paul Hirsch, who was the editor on the original Star Wars. He joined us on FaceTime, so we had a video chat. He was talking about his experience editing the original Star Wars and had chats for a few queries, so that was a lovely bonus. After dinner, chats for more socialising. They did a bit of a party, had some R2-D2 cocktails, Star Wars music, really good atmosphere. Again, lots of socialising, lots of chat going on before the main event of the evening. And that was a talk given by Peter Mcdonald, who was the second unit assistant director, and a guy called Mike Brewster, who was an assistant cameraman on Empire Strikes Back. Excellent chat, very entertaining, very funny. And I think you're going to cut to that now, Rich.
My pleasure to introduce Peter Mcdonald and Mike Brewster. tonight as our highlighted speakers.
So, firstly, thank you very much for coming. You're very kind of you, but I know I'm slightly crazy as Norwegian, so to come for the second time, some of you. This gentleman here was one of the unsung heroes. He was our production manager, Norwegian Sven, who unfortunately died, I think it was 3 or 4 weeks ago. And he was just wonderful. He's a totally trustworthy man that if he said, I gave him the situation, I said, if ever you think there's a problem that we should wrap, we should go back to the hotel, safety is all that matters. And this is the man I listened to the whole time and sadly missed, and goodbye to him. So, well. Also, a little thank you for you coming. Thank you, Kit. This is Mike Brewster, who was the top technician looking after the equipment. I supposedly directed the second unit. This is
Mark from BBC. We could just begin, I guess, by, I don't even know if most people understand what the purpose of the second unit is.
Well, normally the second unit, I was told by one director once that you do all the work and I get all the acclaim, and very often, and the money. But the fun about the second unit is you're never under as much pressure as the first unit because you don't have all the crap of producers and studio on your back. And the art of the second unit really is to make sure there's no difference between your work and the first unit's work. Because if your work looks better than the first unit, you're in deep shit. So it's better to be slightly behind them. When we were here, the first unit were here for about a week shooting with Mark, and then they left us to do the battles, which was great fun. And of course, I'm sure you all know it was the worst winter for 100 years, and very often 40 below, which meant people like Mike had a very tough job looking after the camera equipment. He can just explain, not in too much detail, just so you understand what it's like to work in those conditions.
Well, normally the cameras don't operate in this type of climate, so they have to go through a process called winterizing, which means taking out the normal oil and putting in antifreeze oil to enable them to work. We do have the added problems that things like the zoom lenses and we can't winterize those because they're a sealed unit. So what I did is I got some heater pads, took them apart, and then just wound the heater cable around the lenses so we could plug that up to the generator, and so we could keep them running. We could zoom in full focus and set the hours in. So that was to get the things rolling. Now, one camera we did have that was George's camera, which is an old-fashioned Technicolor 3-strip that had been converted to VistaVision. That ran like a car engine, had a sump, and we couldn't change the oil. So what they did is they constructed what they call a heater barney, which is a big jacket, a heater jacket, fits over the whole camera, and that was built in California to keep the camera rolling. The only trouble with that is you had to take it off and open the camera up to reload. And once you did that, you got the magazine on, everything reloaded, but you had to wait 20 minutes for it to heat up, for it to be able to run. So, I mean, we had all those added problems. And all the gear, you couldn't bring it into this climate. So we had a camera room downstairs on the ground floor that was heated to, well, it was just 1 degree above freezing, so that it stayed in those temperatures, so the lenses didn't steam up when you took them out into the cold. The film didn't break because it was going from hot to cold, and because normally they would just shatter. So that's just some of the hardships we had to take care of the equipment. And we had to repair everything when we got back to the camera room at night, resoldering all the bits that are broken, and it's a harsh climate to work in.
What we'll do later to embarrass Mike at the end would impress me and I tell him how he really screwed up. We won't do that yet.
Before I actually ask you about your AD, how did you know what you were in for? How did you prepare your crew?
Okay, this is a rather sad story. We came out here looking for locations with the main unit and realised what a tough place it was to work. When I came back to England, I got my crew together and told them two things. One, under any moaning, it's going to be extremely cold. You can have the best equipment possible to stop that. And the other thing is, alcohol is very, very expensive. This worried my crew more than saying that we were in war with Russia. Most English crews in those days lived on alcohol. I had a painter who did the sets. I think he was Paddy Irishman. I saw him kind of look up and I said this, come forward about 6 weeks when we're here. I had to go down below looking for someone in this labyrinth of a hotel. And I found that the painter had got rid of all the paint, all the spirits, and brought over nothing but vodka, gin, and pure spirits, and opened up a kind of cocktail bar. I think became very rich and almost ruined my crew. So that was, and then the other thing, I put the whole crew, including Mike, unfortunately, and the equipment in the deep freeze near the studio. Left them there for 6 hours and they came out like icicles, just so everyone understood what we were going to go into. And the other thing that I said about what does an assistant director do? Well, he does what it sounds like, he assists the director, but that's supposed to be happening. The first unit had David Tomlin, who Madeline spoke about a little bit today. David, without a doubt, was the best assistant director in the world. And they organise everything for you, they keep you out of trouble, and if you screw up, they can normally get you out of trouble. Pershing. I had a gentleman called Bill Wesley, and I saw a documentary recently on the making of Empire Strikes Back, and I suddenly hear this voice, and it all came back to me, and someone in the audience today said, was that your voice? Well, Bill's two claims to fame were he never read the script, and he didn't have a watch. Now, as an AD, you'd have thought, I don't know, reading the script's useful, having a watch is essential, because they're supposed to keep you on schedule. But I think Bill was a one-off. The Norwegians, people, they were all from medical backgrounds, and they were fantastic. The extras were the best I've ever, and I'm not just saying them here, they were just fantastic. And I explained to them each day what we were doing, and showed them the storyboard so they knew exactly. So this scene, which I'm sure you all know, when the walkers come towards them, Bill explained to them in his version, in a very kind of rough Londoner thing, what you're going to see, guys, is all these great big hairy monsters coming towards you, and they go, hairy monsters? Yeah, they're great big hairy monsters. And you get your gun, and this lovely Norwegian, they said, but Bill, aren't they mechanical, aren't they walkers? Don't you argue with me. Of course, they did what they knew was right. And I must say, I know people come to a country like we see us sing, saying, oh, I'm so happy, this is my favourite place in the world. But I couldn't have wished for kind of better extras, and the way the hotel treated us, and they tried their hardest to make it all work. For, you know, we were out of our depth. I said, you know, if we don't see snow in England, if we do, everything stops, you know, to come here. You see blizzards and nothing changes, you know, you carry on work. So that was my experience, and Mike could tell about his embarrassment about those in George's camp.
Thank you very much. Well, we had all the sledges full of the camera gear, and so they built wooden crates on the back of the sledges, big ones. And so we all went up to our normal location, but the weather, that was one day, the weather was perfect, and if you went to the top location, the view across, it's like looking across the top of the world. It was magnificent. And the decision was, look, the weather is just perfect. Let's take one cap and go up there and shoot this shot. It would make a lot of difference. So we said, okay, we're going to get out there quickly. Now, the one guy that was driving the big snowcat, he was an amazing driver, young kid. He said, I'll take the camera equipment and I'll go up the short way, which was like that. He thought, no, we'll go the other way. So we went down there and we got there. He wasn't there. And he's supposed to be going up the quick way. So we waited and waited. There's something wrong here. And then all of a sudden, across this right, this snowcat went like a whale coming out of the water. With no crate on the back. He only, come, he said. So I jumped in the snowcat. He threw it over the edge. I went down, and there was the sledge with the back of the crate open, and all George's camera was down the mountain.
That was a burden, by the way.
Yeah. And if it had carried on, it would have reached Bergen. Unfortunately, some of it hit the rock and it stopped it. But we had wet batteries and the acid had all poured out. So, in the end, I got down there, and fortunately, George's camera was in a little wooden crate, and it was okay. So we got it all back into the crate, and we put a big strap around it, putting it all together, hooked it up to the cat. Up we went, and we got up to the top, over there, and the weather closed. So we never got the shot. So,
I never employed them again. So
yeah, I was threatened with the sack, and I said, it's not my fault. I said, yeah, but look. Yeah, but.
Well, just on a day-to-day basis, how would you get your crew fed? How would I get your crew fed?
Oh, the hotel, food.
Oh, food.
Yes.
Oh, the other two here.
Yeah, that was amazing.
We had two wonderful ladies, middle-aged ladies, who used to bring out the food to us on a skidoo. We call it skidoos. Wherever we were, and you've got to remember, the worst winter in 100 years, sometimes 40 degrees below. I mean, and these ladies never failed, and they did two things. They always got the food to us, and they were always smiling. But after about 3 weeks, some of the crew started, was English crew, moaning about the food, no fish and chips. So that night I went back to the hotel and spoke to Sven and Phil, the Australian location manager, and said, let's try something. Bring on not tomorrow, but the day after, bring on a little bit special on a Friday, maybe try something different. So Friday comes, and we're at one of the far locations, and the weather is atrocious. It becomes 40 degrees below. Out of nowhere come the two little ladies on their skidoos, smiling away. We're all dying, they're smiling. They opened up the food thing, and they had done something special. Some of you know this, I told it last year. Spaghetti bolognese. Now, when you have spaghetti bolognese when it's 40 degrees below, you pick it up like that. What is there is now solid. But funny enough, not a bad way to eat spaghetti because they just crunch you. So that night I went back, saw the lovely ladies, and they said, how did it go, Mr. Peter? I said, it's fantastic, but I think we'll go back to the meatballs tomorrow. But I mean, the only really other lady on the film was Pamela Mann, the continuity girl. And you think, one lady in those type of things, not like us men, can easily go a little tittle. I mean, what she must have suffered being out 10 hours a day in this weather. I never once moaned, never once groaned. I mean, she was like a little heroine. I loved the lady. And luckily she's still with us, because some of us are gone. And I will hand it back to you because you remind me what else we were going to say.
Well, just the problems of continuity in an environment like that. How on earth can you achieve it? I mean, pretty much everything looks white out there.
Well, I mean, because it's really no different if you're in a jungle or a desert here. I mean, but obviously when the weather's really bad, it does become difficult for everyone. And after a few days shooting the battle sequence, which I must say I was very proud of what we were doing, I thought we were doing well, and came back to the hotel, and the hotel then just had one phone, in the foyer. And I got into someone said, "Oh, Gary Kurtz is calling you from London," who was the producer. And I thought, well, he's going to call me and say how wonderful everything was. You know, Gary was quite a serious man with no humour. And he said, "I've seen your rushes from the last couple of days. I'm not happy," he said, "because one of the troops in the background didn't have his scarf on properly." And I'm thinking, what the? We're working at Bullseye. It's 40 degrees below. And someone back of the classroom doesn't have his, I want you to do it all again. And I thought, the worst thing a director can be told is, you've got to shoot it again. You can imagine. You've got to go to your crew and say, "I screwed up, that scarf back there." But luckily, George Lucas had seen the film a few hours later in LA and called across and said, "Carry on exactly as you are," and kind of without saying, ignore the Quaker, which we did. So it is quite annoying what people look at instead of the actual. I mean, that's what the editor Paul was saying, that you give them all the material and then they edit it. They don't worry about someone in the background with a bad scarf or something like that. So there are ups and downs.
But also, one of the other added problems we had is that most of the set was trenches, like the First World War, which we had to dig with the plough and the snowcat. But the weather was so bad, every time we went back to the hotel to spend the night, the next morning it was all filled in. So every day we had to dig the trenches again, to reset the same scene that we ended up the night before to carry on the next day. There was one day where it was beautiful, blew from edge to edge, and the wind was blowing. So once again, it was really, really cold. I mean, I did get to the stage where I was setting the camera up, and I walked down the trench to put the camera, the tripod down, and I just put my head against the eyes, and I just wanted to fall asleep. I was so tired, and the Norwegian guy that was with us, he said, "We have to go back now." He said, "Sorry?" He said, "Yeah." He said, "We have to go back. The weather's closing in and everybody's falling." What I was suffering from was the first stages of hypothermia, because I wanted to know. I thought this is a nice way to go, actually. Just not go out, might be sometime, just go and fall asleep, but no, you wake up afterwards. But the thing is that I don't know how he knew, but we got halfway back and the weather just went shoot. It ended up like this whiteout. I don't know how he knew, but he did. And so we got to the stage where with the trail, because there's crevasses, all over the place. The trail was marked by these big twigs, so that we could stay on the trail without driving down the crevasse. So I had to go out in front of the snowcat and try and find the next twig. Wave it on, so he caught me up, and then we got to the twig, and then I walked, and that's how we got back. Must have taken us about 2 hours to get back.
But they got overtime, so they were happy.
Yeah, I got paid for it, yeah.
Well, was there ever a point where you just thought, "That's it, I'm done, this is an insane situation"? I mean, you were there for 1 week, 2 weeks, 3 weeks, 4 weeks.
Yeah, it was a paycheck. You get paid.
But you're going to lose your eyebrows.
You have to remember that we were the country that gave the World Scott of the Antarctic.
Yeah.
And that we made it, and you lot did make it by being sensible and eating the huskies. So we have a lot to learn still about. But there's always been that slight craziness in the kind of British mentality. And we live in a very normal country. If it rains too much, we panic. If it snows too much, we panic. Yet in the film industry, we work all over the world. Here we're 40 below. A few months before that, I've been in the Sahara Desert, 120 degrees in the Sahara Desert. Then Mike and I went to did a war film in a rainforest with almost every single thing they wanted to kill you, all the snakes and spiders. So you got to get used to nothing being too normal. And we more or less fall on our feet. So Oh, okay, that's a reinforcement. Thank you very much. We all have a past. It did pay my mortgage. Is he still there? Okay. I think George Lucas did one slide, maybe played Chewbacca, but I don't know. Because the hair's great.
So by the end of 7 weeks,
Yeah.
what did you? You obviously wanted to get out of here as quickly as possible.
And into therapy.
Yeah.
Well, so they'd all the grown-ups had gone back, and so we had to pack all the gear up and get it ready for transportation. But so on the way down, remember we had been up here for 7 weeks, so we were a little bit stir crazy. And on the train, the first time we saw a tree, well, it was just like utopia. My God, look, there's a tree! And then we saw a car. Well, that just tipped us over the edge. But it's as much as we enjoyed it here, we really look forward to getting home, getting in the warm, so you can walk outside the door without all these clothes on. So, yeah, that was it. Really. It was quite exciting to go back home, see the family. But the phone call, we got one a week if you were lucky, because you had to book a call to get all the, it's not like you've got mobile phones now. You had to ring up, book a call, and then you go back when the call came through, when they connected to your house. Yeah.
Well, so how much confidence or lack of confidence do the producers, directors have to have in the second unit? Say like, okay, we can go back to the studio, Peter and his crew are going to sort this and it's not going to go wrong, we're not going to worry.
Well, you normally get offered, but my background obviously was 30 years behind the camera, so I knew roughly what I was doing. And when I got the call from Bruce Sharman about doing the second unit, this is my big break, because this has been the first big thing I directed. So you are, and also you're a little bit younger than we are now, so you do have a certain confidence about what you're doing. And it depends on the director. You have to match what the first unit director has done. Even if you disagree with it totally, it has to match what they've done, which sometimes is easy, sometimes not. Because sometimes you can do better than they've done, but of course that is a huge mistake, because that's the last thing we want, anything better than what you've done. I mean, we spoke earlier about, Mark asked me about any bad directors, and I did the second unit on Rambo 2, with this Greek director, Kosmasis, who was without a doubt the worst director I've ever worked with in my life. And he came to me one day, he used to have 3 cigarettes in his mouth at the same time, he was too confused to realise that. And he said, I've had a great idea. I thought, oh shit. He said, I want you to have a little helicopter or something. So I want you to take the helicopter underneath the waterfall, you wait there and then you come out. And I said, well, you can't do that. He said, well, I want you to do that. I said, well, because you'll die. He said, but I only want you to do it once. I said, well, we only die once, George. I said, well, what I did, I took him up in the Huey helicopter and we alter, just to show him, and you alter rotate, which means they stop the rotor and you drop like a stone. And I could hear this Greek man screaming above the noise of the helicopter. He jumped out the bottom, and I think for the next 6 weeks of shooting, he just kept well clear of me and my pilots from Vietnam. But you just meet these, most people are, by their very nature of how much film cost, very confident. And I mean, working with, say, Tim Burton on Batman was a joy, because he was such an inventive man, or working with Richard Donner on Superman, that these type of people you learn from. Then there's the medium ones that really don't take any risk, but the exciting ones are when you work with someone that's out there. Like in anything, in art, music, when you get someone that's really daring, that's the people that inspire you and also you learn from, which is, I think that you should be, because every day, I mean, I've worked in the film industry for 60 years, and I don't think I can honestly say I never had one boring day. No, I don't suppose many people would say that, you know. So it's always exciting and always a different problem.
Well, I suppose one of the things we kind of forget is you were here for 7 weeks shooting what is effectively the beginning of the film.
Yeah.
So in one way, you're establishing a kind of tone of the film.
Yeah.
There was a cinematographer, that's Peter Schulitz,
Yeah.
who I think you have deep, fond memories of.
Thank you.
Dropped you in it.
Okay. Has this been broadcast? Peter Sisley was the first year cameraman, and he was a good cameraman, but he and I were very different personalities, you know. And he was very dull and serious, and I was rather the opposite. So it was a difficult relationship, but luckily we were totally here, we were isolated, so we couldn't be kind of interfered with in any way. And then when we went back to studio, all that mattered was that the Kirsch, the director, and George were happy. That's all that mattered. Didn't matter anyone else's ego being dented. You were paid to make their vision, put their vision on the screen, and I'm very proud of the scenes we did, the battle sequence. You know, I thought it looked great. It's quite unusual to do trench warfare in the snow. That's probably why no one ever did it in actual war, and we found out why. You get buried by the snow troops every day. I mean, funny enough, had the First World War been shot in Norway, it'd been over in about 3 weeks. All the frostbite, but no one. So it's I think I've got my balance. I rambled a bit there, but did that answer your question?
Yeah, indeed. Well, you got out of that quite well.
So I mean, Gary Kurtz had produced Star Wars, he produced Empire, but that was it. Did you have any sense of why he would part company?
Did you work with him?
Yeah, I did. I did work with him again, and there's good reason for that, really. Yeah, he was an idiot, really, but...
Really an idiot, or just out of his depth?
Yeah, we're just one end and the other one didn't. He had no inventiveness in him at all. He couldn't think outside the box, basically, and he had to had to have logic about everything that we did. You know, we used to say, you can put the camera there. He said, well, no, you can't put the camera there because it wouldn't go there. He said, yeah, but we can do that. But he couldn't understand it. And the film I did with him afterwards, it wasn't a very good film, but we were setting it up and there was no money. And so our line producer didn't want to have video assist because trying to save money. And he said, well, how will we know whether we got the shot? He said, well, like they used to do in the old days. He said, just trust the operator. He'll tell you whether it was any good or not. He just couldn't get that. He couldn't understand it.
And that film was?
Slipstream. Who's seen Slipstream? Hands up. Okay.
No.
That's great. I'll ask you one more question. Who's seen King Kong Lives?
No.
You haven't.
Go on, tell us what I've seen.
That's amazing.
I've made some crap in my life.
That's two of them. Watch King Kong Lives. I forgot what I was going to say. Beautiful.
So, well, I mean, you're here for 7 weeks, right? And then that's it. You're off onto another adventure. I think you went to Africa, didn't you?
Yeah, I mean, that's the wonderful thing about the film industry. You go from here, obviously, and the next film I got, directed the second unit, luckily with the Barber's David Tomlin with me. I was given 10,000 Zulu Warriors to do battles in Africa when they beat the shit out of the British. So it was quite good fun. Of course, we had these Zulu Warriors, and they weren't people from the countryside, they from Johannesburg, so they'd never been without shoes for their life. So the first shot we did with them charging through the undergrowth, 10,000 of them, it looked like a multiple Tom and Jerry. when they're running on hot coals, it looked like a lot of Tom and Jerry colours jumping up and down because their feet were. And we had to get hundreds of pairs of black, you just call them plimsolls those days, to. But that's the marvellous thing about the challenge of. I'm the one on this side. He was, keep that up a sec. This guy played Cheteswara, who was the king of the Zulus. Incredible. I mean, it's a true story. He was an incredible man. But this is South Africa during the apartheid. It's terrible times. This man had directed on Broadway. Played Hamlet. He'd done everything. Brilliant man. And I was taken him to a location. It was quite a long journey. About a 5-hour journey. After a couple of hours, there was one little tiny pub restaurant. We stopped there to have a meal. I went into the place, I said, there's 5 of us in the car, you would come and have a meal. He said, oh, great. And I brought him in with me. And the guy looked, he said, get the nigger out of here. And I died. Because this man was better educated, more brilliant than any of us. Get the nigger out. We went, so I said, well, he doesn't eat here, we don't. So we ate the 5 of us ate in the car park. And I felt so sorry for this man. That, I mean, 15, 20 years later, obviously, it all changed. But at that time, it was, but that's the kind of, in a way, the excitement of being here, a very stable country, although you're a bit crazy, but you're very stable. Let's go there. And then Mike and I ended up in the rainforest, and I said in the Philippines. Being with Stallone in Mexico when he talked about nuking all the Mexicans. Where are you, Miguel? We're still here. No, he did say that. We were flying in a helicopter. I said, he looked down at Mexico. He said, one day we're probably going to come and nuke these ourselves. So luckily, I mean, we've got Trump now, so we're safe. But, then you go to spend 5 years on Harry Potter, you know, so it's just an incredible night, and then you do musicals and all the different type of films.
Just before I came here, I was doing Life of Brian out in North Africa. and then come here.
You worked on Life of Brian?
Yeah, and it was rather hot. And this was rather cold.
And was there a second unit on Life of Brian? Was it a pretty low budget film?
All very low budget. No, there was no second unit. It was all us. Yeah, and it was a lot of fun. Yeah. Yeah, we had lots of laughs.
And how much improvisation would take place on a kind of daily basis, either with...
What was that?
Yeah.
No, not much. Most of it was scripted. I mean, it was a bit a board of directors directing it, but Terry Jones actually had the last word. But no, it was just that. I mean, some of the rehearsals were funnier than the actual movie.
Pretty funny.
With Michael Palin, my friend Roger. Rose. I won't say the rest of it. It's children here.
Pretty much every school child can write those films. So what is a film production? Are you a circus? Are you a kind of family of vagabonds? I mean, you move through the world.
Well, I'm also a very calm, sweet person. The rest are a bunch of arseholes normally, but I'm very easygoing.
Yeah.
But what you have to do, I mean, you have to be serious. If you're a director, captain, but people have to have confidence in you.
And time is money.
And trust you. I mean, I'm more worried about the crew than the producer. So you have to be trusted, but you can ask people to do things. Sometimes a little bit, I mean, you're never stupid about danger. I'm very aware of danger, but you do, a dangerous stunt. So you're always on the edge. Things could go wrong. You know? So your crew have to believe in you, and they have to always like you, but they have to believe and trust you, as you would in the army. If someone says to you, "We're going to do this," you know. So you kind of have to lead a bit from the front, you know. And very often, if we do the dangerous stunt, because like 40 years of being a cameraman, I would often take the camera that was probably in the most danger, because I was fairly stupid, quite honest, or maybe it was ego, I don't know. But so that bit was. But I think that's the thing about it. One of the qualities I didn't have enough, I was never selfish enough. I mean, as a director, you really got to only think of yourself. And what you want to put on the screen. And at times I think I was a bit too soft about that, you know. Hence, I'm here is sort of living in Malibu with a great big car and a sailing boat. Not that one sailing boat, but back to you, Mark.
Well, I mean, obviously these opening sequences that you're directing also involve complicated stop motion special effects that I am and Girard. How much freedom did you have to choose what you wanted to shoot as opposed to what would be needed?
So on these complex films like this, especially nowadays, I work on Guardians of the Galaxy, those type of films, everything is very much storyboarded. But what I've always done, you obey the storyboard with one camera, give them exactly what they've asked for, but you don't want to have 2 or 3 other cameras, so you do other angles that may be more exciting anyway, because the storyboards are often done by someone in an office 5,000 miles away, so they're not really necessarily in tune with the film. So you do have that amount of freedom. I mean, even on the sequence we did here, there was basic storyboards, but I should say half the shots were shots that we did because they looked better than the storyboard, but you gave them what they asked for. So
you'd have a shot list for the day?
Well, my shot list was always in my head, not in my hand, you know. Because I found, we spoke earlier, you know, if you give everyone a shot list and the producer keeps on coming up and looking over people's shoulders saying, how many shots have you done, how much you got left, which drives you crazy. I mean, I had one arsehole producer, I took over a film, and I realised one of the first unit director had been sacked, you know, because it was a producer's fault, it wasn't his. And he came up to me doing a huge night shoot in Hungary. And I'd organised the night, the camera here, then the other camera down there, we leapfrogged. And he came up to me, he said, what are you doing? I said, well, we're doing this shot here, then another. And I said, but I can talk to you all night and get behind schedule, or you can let me do my job. And he said, and what lens have you got on that camera there? I said, the right one. That's what we need to know. That's the right one. He said, I can tell you anything. I could say it's an 800mm or 5mm. So either, I swore, but I won't swear because kids in it, either you or I carry on. So that bit is difficult because it's something about studios and bad producers. There are good ones, but bad producers. Instead of backing you, instead of saying, they're the people that make my film, they often do all they can to undermine you. And what they do, as I found out when I started directing for myself, they wait till you got back to the hotel at 10 o'clock at night, and then you've been out since 6, the phone will go, and they go, I saw this, I saw that. So they knew you were at your weakest when they dive into you. You know? So it always amazed me. There are wonderful producers, especially some of the old-time ones. But I think we were talking earlier, I think it's Homeland, and I counted 18 to 20 people with producer credit. Now, how can you have 18 people being producers? Well, we did a film called A Bridge Too Far, which was the war story. We have one producer, Joe Levine, who got the money, got the actors, and that you have to admire, you know. But when I see 18, 20 producers on one film, it blows my mind.
It's all about power.
I'm glad I'm out of it. I'll give you back when you need a drink.
Well, tell us more about power, because you're in a different relationship.
Yeah, but that's right. You know, in my position, I don't have to confront the producers as the camera assistant.
So what can make a shoot go bad?
Script.
Which obviously, if the script's bad, then everyone knows it's
you don't
bad.
stand a chance then, do you? Really? I mean, that's the basis of everything. You get a good script.
Yeah. Then you ever film just with a screw up? We started with a script that's not ready to film.
Yeah.
And then you make it up as you go along.
Yeah, and then you just got to hope you get a good car. Well, if you've got a good script, then it's easier to get a good car.
I think there's a troublemaker.
While we're talking about producers who not only can screw up but can ruin a director, Peter should talk about Cabaret.
Is that an order or can I?
And also Rudolph Nureyev, but Cabaret Posse.
Most people here were born when we made Cabaret. Cabaret was a musical with Liza Minnelli, that swept the board with Oscars. It's a very, very good film. The director was Bob Fosse, who was in fact my favourite director. And the producer hated it. He hated everything we did. He wanted a bright, shiny film, and Bob made a film set in Berlin in the mid-30s, the Nazis are coming in. So he made a moody film, and the producer just tried to destroy Bob Fosse. There's a very good TV series last year called Fosse, which you haven't seen, it's well worth seeing. One day the producer came on the set, and Bob is usually quite calm, and he lost his temper, and he said to the producer, "Tell me just one thing you've done for me." And he said, "I'll tell you two things. I've hired you, and so far I haven't fired you." And I thought that gives you great confidence if you're a director. But the wonderful end of the story is the film won, I think, 8 Oscars, but the only Oscar he didn't get was for the producer. But even then he wouldn't admit that we were right and he was wrong, you know. So I really had to admire the tenacity of Bob Fosse and other directors I've worked with. And of course, later on, it happened to be, I'm telling Mark a story, the last film, I have to admit this now, I directed, which none of you have seen, called The Extreme Adventures of Super Dave, no hands up, which maybe is one of the worst films ever made. And when they showed me the script, I said, "This is terrible." But I was on another film, they said, "Oh, don't worry, while you finish the other film, we will make the script, we will change it, we will change it." Total lies. Anyway, we made the film. I died 1,000 deaths every day. Eventually cut the film together, and I showed it to the head of MGM Studios, dying inside. And the lights went up at the end, and I looked around us. He said to me, "Peter, look me in the eyes." I thought, "Yeah." He said, "Who are you looking at? What are you looking at?" And I'm thinking to myself, I'm looking at someone that probably wants to commit suicide. He said, "You are looking at the happiest man in Hollywood." He said, "You pulled it off, you cracked it." And I said, "Did we see the same epic film?" Anyway, then you show it to the public, which is the worst experience anyone could have. And they made it clear what they thought. And we kept re-editing. You can't, I mean, Paul, if he was here the other winter, if it's bad, it's bad. There's nothing you can really do. And we used to go to this conference, I was in MGM in Hollywood, big conference room, long table, like there's this room. And I found each time I went to a meeting, there were more empty chairs between me and the executive, and I could just see them at the end of the table. And the last time I went in there, which was my last day in Hollywood, I said, "Well, one thing, gentlemen, can you see me?" I said, "One thing," I said, "we made history today with this film." And they said, "What do you mean, Peter?" I said, "We made the first film that's going to go straight to radio." And that was it, that was my goodbye. They showed me the door and I never looked back, you know. But that was my own fault, because I should have, when I realised they weren't going to change the script. And I'm glad none of you have seen Super Dave, because he was, how anyone would think they could make a film, he must have been well in his 60s, thought he was like a bit of a hero, stuntman, had the worst wig I've ever seen in my life. It was a lopsided wig, where the colours didn't match. When I met him in New York, I never heard of Super Dave, and he came up to me and said, "Oh, Peter, call me Soup." I said, "What?" He said, "Call me Soup." I said, "How does that work out in restaurants? You know, you get a lot of trouble if everyone calls Soup, and they think they're waiting for your minestrone or something." But that was my last mistake that I admit to anyway.
I mean, the peer reviewing, in one way, has seen an extraordinary cycle of films evolve with the Harry Potter movie. What was that, 7, 8 films?
There was 8 films. I did 6 of the 8.
So it's very rare to work across, I mean, if we think of the Star Wars trilogy.
Oh,
very rare.
Okay, yeah.
So,
Absolutely, yeah.
what was your sense of them developing organically or inorganically, these films?
Well, it's not like, it's not like you get a choice. I mean, I was never fortunate enough to be able to turn anything down. So you just basically take the work that's offered, and it becomes diverse purely by the nature of the work you get offered. the most continuity I ever had was Harry Potter.
I think most people, I mean, you never have a run, they go back to back as well. Whereas normally, say the Bond film, it'd be like a 3-year, 4-year gap. We did the first 4, I did the first 4 Harry Potters, and they took one up here.
Yeah, they took a year to make. You see, so they
For 7 years.
It's 10 years altogether.
So that's a lifetime for lifetime for the cast.
There were some people who worked who were in the film industry. That's all they did. They'd only ever worked on Harry Potter for 10 years. And then when that came to an end, what a big rude awakening that became. Out in the real world, get another job if you can.
You must read what Daniel says to me there. Look at that. Thank you for your guidance. That was before Super Day, I think.
He had very poor eyesight because he sent me a picture and he said to Mike Brewster, the coolest man I know. So his eyesight was very, very poor.
So, I think we've said enough, but obviously if anyone wants to throw any insults or compliments or money, we'll accept it. So any questions apart from Madeline, I'd be welcome. Yes, Madeline.
You did work with a woman director. You did have a great experience with Barbara Streisand and with Zelda Barron.
I know a little about Barbara and I. Just between her and I.
Another musical film.
Yep, I did
and
say
David
that.
Watkin was sleeping, so you did more than just camera operate.
Some of that stuff I've said had a bit of humour to it, which I should explain to you later. Your turn.
So,
Michael?
excuse me?
Who do you want?
For both of you guys, like whoever wants to answer.
It's not a trick
we
question.
kind of touched up on that a little bit in Madeline's talk when we were sitting close to me. But I was curious, are there things from the harsh conditions and the challenges that you faced here shooting Empire Strikes Back that you solved in such a way you found a new solution to things that you took to other shoots? Because I'm guessing you never really were back in a harsh condition like this, but I'm sure you must have learned things, even maybe leadership things in such harsh conditions that you took with you. What would those be?
That's a very good question. You certainly learn what you're capable of. Like when you say to people, why do you climb that mountain? They say, because it's there. You say, well, you're crazy. So you learn what you're capable of yourself, and as a kind of slight leadership role, you learn how you've got to get people on your side to work through. So yes, I certainly gained a lot of confidence. Imagine that was my first time really directed, so that gave me a lot of confidence. So once I got over the Gary Kurtz and the scarf incident, after that I believed I could do it. And I think the technical side.
There was, we developed ways of insulating batteries and things. And one thing we did learn is to always have rubber cables, don't have plastic ones. Because you ended up with this long cable that was as stiff as a board. The moment you try and bend it, it was just a crack. So you just use rubber cables. And insulating the batteries up to a degree made them last virtually all day. Because when we first arrived, within a half an hour, the battery's gone because it's so cold.
This thing will die in 2 hours.
Totally.
Inside as well.
Yeah. So we made wooden boxes lined with polystyrene for each battery, and then we had generators with us, 2 of them, to power all the heater elements for all the lenses and the big camera, to have that running all day long.
I thought of something.
A couple of electricians to actually keep them running.
Yeah, that makes sense.
Well, you've seen the size of George's camera, like a refrigerator.
That's me, yeah.
Yeah, and that's the unhandsome one there. But George had Central America, the latest Brewster Vision camera, and the two people that had made it, they were both boffins. They were like scientists, and they walked through the door of this hotel. We're all sitting in the lounge. The big gales of blizzards that day. As the door opened, they were blown in with their couple of boxes, and their camera was like this big. Our camera was that big. So they were typical, nice, but never been out of the country before, Americans. So they came up, they said, well, what do you want us to do with the camera? And I said, well, leave it outside. They said, but it's cold outside. I said, yes, there's a very good tune like that. I said, but that's where it's going to be tomorrow. And remember, these guys had spent months making this camera. I don't think it ever worked the rest of the film.
It was, it used every technology known to man, apart from the movement. It was a carbon fibre body, right, with, but they had to use a Mitchell Vista Vision movement. But it was carbon fibre, it's all digital readout, they used Nikon lenses, so they were very, these new electric pancake motors, they called them, they were very flat, so they could fit into this body. And then they got it out after they said, well, put it outside. So they took it outside, set it up, put the lens on, and turned over. I think it ran 3 frames, I think. And
They were beautiful frames, though.
That was the last it ever ran. I put it back in a box and shipped it back to LA.
Probably 100,000.
And what was that camera for?
A place.
It's exactly the same as the big one.
Vista Vision.
Yeah. Can I just, the lovely, it's been up a few times, but Madeline, there's some questions asked at the last session with Madeline about women on films and respect and not. Pam was our continuity girl, and basically the only lady on the film, on the set. And all the time I've worked for 60 years, I've never ever seen a continuity girl treated with anything but total respect. Because most of them are scarier than any of us anyway, but they demand respect, they get respect. So that has always been, I agree that there's not enough ladies in the film industry. It is changing, it's changing very slowly. I know that I had the same problem with when I did a film in Chicago, which was basically mostly an all-black film. I went to the unions there saying, we really got to have as many black people, electricians, as we can. And it's a terrible, once again, it's not a happy story. I was with the police chief, the union chief, the mafia. I said, we did. And the union chief said, yeah, we had a nigger electrician once, didn't we? And the mafia said, no, he got killed. And that was it, And so in England, I think it's worse for mostly, because we have a lot of West Indians, it's less, I think it's easier for women now than it is for the minority races, because women become stronger and I think they become weaker, so, but once again, the respect I've always had for the continuity guys, because their job, especially then, was very different. Now it's a bit different because you have video playback, they don't have to have a memory. But in the old days, they saw it once, and they would tell you how long the cigarette ash was. Because remember the old films, everyone smoked, everyone was drinking, and they would get it right just like that, So my respect for them and the way they were treated, and you would never give any of them crap because you would get it back 10 times worse, as it should be. I can't get the shell.
Zelda Barron was a great one who became a director, Steve Barron's mom, and Anne Skinner, who was continuity and for Star Wars, she became a very prominent producer. Our great friend Angela Allen used to do second unit for John Huston. So in England, they went directing or producing because they've got the brains.
Yes, well also, they used to, like lovely lady Maggie Hunter, and the films in it's like 50 years ago, the continuity girl would go all through the film, including the editing. She would go to the director through the editing process because she knew every shot, where they were, what they were shot for, why things didn't work. So it was a very responsible job and very, very highly respected. But I don't think I've ever met one continuity girl that didn't have real strength, Well, there's a couple of woozy ones we had on Legionnaire, but I won't go there. But most of them, especially the old ones, had really great characters and a very tough job. And were fairly fearless as well. I mean, they would tell an actor what he'd done wrong, and Andy Skinner would say to a director, "Would you need a close-up?" And then he said, "Well, I don't." He said, you need a close. And that was it. The tone of voice, no, you do need a close up. Okay, Adam, we would do it, and they were right. So they are a kind of dying breed, but they're still around. I think we just about just with it.
Yeah. What were your separate
The rooms we had last year here.
Yeah. What are your reactions to seeing the film after being here? And I mean,
I'll catch you up. Matt and I watched it 2 days before we came here again.
Yeah.
Just to remind myself that I might get asked a difficult question. My main thing, I was very proud of what we shot here, really proud. But I hadn't realised how corny some of the dialogue was, and how bad at that time Harrison Ford was as an actor. I mean, he improved, but he needed to. But George might have been a good producer, but writing dialogue, especially romantic dialogue, I mean, it was pantomime embarrassing. Now this all goes to George, so that's the end of my career, right? Good question.
Wait. With George, okay, so there's a story that Paul told me at his house. This isn't being zoomed around the world, is it?
Yes.
Well, anyway, Gary
I just got a hint from George.
Kirsch used to come into the editing room and he'd rant and everything when things would go down, and then he'd go down again. But also when Gary Kurtz told the crew what to do, like in Norway, Kirsch said to Paul, "Don't need 1 foot of film."
Sure, yeah.
No, they're not allowed. But there was something I wanted to ask you to talk about. Forget it. It'll come back, but it was important about.
Okay.
And Mike, it's right.
This was, just thinking, this film, it surprised me when I saw it, because this is the first one that I'd worked on as a camera assistant, where we were doing all these plates and imagining the things that were going to be in the frame. This is the first one that I did where it actually struck me, and I was so impressed by the marriage of visual effects in a way, because modern stuff, and the motion control that was just coming into play. This is the first one that actually, it's like a light bulb moment, thinking, my God, what the things we can do. And that was this one. And then we moved right on since then.
Yeah, this gentleman who's here this morning talking about buying stuff, is he here? Was it Gus? He's got it, probably buying something.
It's back there.
Stand up. Sorry, I mean, personally I thought was a really interesting hour. It broke my heart that I threw my stuff away.
Yeah, me too.
But it was quite interesting, because you spoke about many of the things you bought. The art department was English, and really good people. And last year, Alan Tompkins came, who was the art director, and he told me, and he's not at all ego guy. And a lot of stuff you were talking about, they made them. They had they cut the budget down. So a lot of that improvisation, the stuff you talked about, we had this on here, was done by the English art department. Norman Reynolds was the art director, and time before that was John Barry, who was a genius. So very often, the English way is not to take too much praise on board, and I think they never got enough acclaim for what they did, And this is no way of criticising you, because I want you to buy my coat later. Yes, sir.
Peter, I understand you worked with George Lucas again on the Young Indiana Jones adventures?
Yes, I did 2 episodes in Africa on Young Indy, which was actually great fun. And the 2 I did, he eventually turned them into a movie of the week, so I did 2 separate. They joined together, but they weren't ever supposed to be separate. And it's a marvellous story, true story about Africa during the First World War. And a group of old English guys in their 70s decided they were going to fight the Germans, and the British said, we don't need people your age. So they got their own platoon together and did fight, and these are 70-year-old people. So I bought the cast from England of these old English actors in the late 60s, 70s, touching 80. And they had one thing in common, they were all drunks. And, which I kind of knew, because I've worked with them all before, but it's different working at Shepperton Studios with a drunk. I mean, they're all professionals when they came to work, but every night. And I took them out to Africa, and it's I don't know if you saw the young Indiana Jones, it's like the big Indiana Jones, but less time and more action. And I suddenly realised I had a big sequence on a train when these old guys are running across the top of the train. So I got stunt guys dressed up like them. And there's one lovely actor called Freddie Jones who I've worked with many times, marvelous actor. And he said, Pete, Petey, he said, Petey, yes, Petey. That man there who's got my clothes on. I said, yes. He said, what is he? I said, well, he's your stunt double. Why? I said, because the train is moving and you're running down the top of the train jumping. Yes, but why is he? I said, because stupid Petey, I'll do that. And he did just, well, the actual actor was in his mid-20s, very, very fit. Could not believe these bunch of English guys could do every night. They would sit around the bar in the middle of nowhere in Africa, sit around the bar and reminisce all the stories.
Especially Fred.
And, but every day they came to work, they were perfect and were there. Even now I feel like kind of weeping a bit, but you had so much admiration for these. Lots of big stage actors, but every night it was the way they gin and tonic, got back, not a shower, gin and tonic first, and it was just their professionalism. And I died. You wouldn't be able to nowadays. You wouldn't be allowed to do it because health and safety would, and rightly so, to be quite honest. But if you can use an actor, it's 10 times better than using a stunt guy because they've got their body language, they've got exactly what they would do. But I wouldn't advise it. Anyway, any question over here?
Yeah, I was curious, just more specifically about this location. So when it came to actually selecting Finse, is that a decision that ultimately rested with Lucas, who said that's the place that I want, or? I
just thought I'm guessing now, but they probably said that we had an Australian guy called Phil Kohler who was the location manager. It's a one-off, he was the best I've ever worked in every respect. So what you do, you have the script, they say, well, what we're looking for is an area where 360 degrees of snow is guaranteed, but you have to have facilities quite close, and if possible a place that it's easy to get to. People had tried before that and after that to work in Iceland, and it'd been a total I know the scenery there is unbelievable. It's been so hard to work, whereas here, you've got a hotel. If you wanted to, you could shoot 100 meters down the road, you could be shooting. And so they probably did look at other places, but I said what they do normally, they send a location manager that's really savvy, and he will travel around, and you would talk to other people, where did you make this film? They would know that they shot some of the Scott of the Antarctic film here. They would know that Scott and Adam actually trained here, so it gives you a clue that it's probably not a bad place to. In fact, when we were here last year, I don't know if you remember, the Australia, New Zealand, Antarctic team were here. We were going to probably have done it now. They were going to do the South Pole run. And what was marvellous about that, getting back to the women thing, there's all these Australians, all 7 foot tall, great big guy. And I said to them, who's in charge? A little boy said, I am. A little lady, about 5 foot tall. And you looked at this lady's eyes, you thought, yeah, you're in charge. And they all, obviously they respected her very much. She was their leader. Okay. Anything else?
You touched on the issue of safety earlier with Mike's brush with hypothermia and you're taking the more dangerous camera positions.
Yeah.
But you're essentially making a war film in a really hostile environment. How do you keep your cast and crew safe? And following on from that, did you have any nasty incidents with the cold or with
we had
injuries otherwise?
Frostbite. I think one special effect guy had to be sent home with frostbite. We had no. That's me with frostbite. That was makeup. But there was no accidents. I mean, the stuff we were doing here wasn't really dangerous. I mean, dangerous stuff is when you're running through the trenches and things. But this was all a bit calm, you know. But your first responsibility, at least in my opinion, as a director or as a cameraman, is to look after your crew. And the assistant director, you look after your crew. And most of the times I've heard about accidents, they've been lax in that respect, you know. So I hope that answers your question. I'm going to need a drink in a minute.
Well, speaking about safety, there is your bridge too far story where,
Which one?
in terms of people jumping out of aeroplanes, which is always a risky experience, and what the RAF captain.
Okay, last story. When we did a bridge too far, which was I don't know how much you've seen every film in the world. Anyway, this was the biggest parachute jump in history, which was, if it worked, would end the war, probably Second World War, 6 months earlier. And the days we made it, there was no siege, it was all for real. So we had like 300 parachutists and about 12 decoders of DC-3 planes. And then we had our first meeting, and this English squadron leader came along to hold a meeting with myself, Jeff Unsworth, David Tollin, and Dickie Attenborough, the director. And he was everything about an English person. I hate this guy. He was very snobby. And he said, if 300 people jump in, yes, you could expect like a 2% fertility. So I put my hand up. I said, excuse me. I said, I'm not as well educated as you, but are you saying 2% people could die and we're having 300 people jump in? He said, well, yes. He said, war. I said, no, whoa. This isn't a war. This is a film, you know. And I looked at Dickie Attenborough. I was sitting, okay, Dickie, you know, because I said, I'm going to walk out. You know, I said, if you think we're going to be involved, any of the camera crew, that people get killed. You know. Anyway, he said, well, maybe the 2% is exaggeration. That's when you trap you when the equipment comes out of the restaurant. But also, none of these kids, these young parachutes, I don't know if you've seen a real, they're about my height. They're all little people, you're all sweaty. They're tiny little people covered in equipment. And if they feel, when you see them land, you feel so sorry, you want to pick them up and look after them. But and none of them ever jumped out of the side of the plane, because nowadays they all jump out the Hercules out the back. So for them, it's a big deal, you know. And I knew that we only had to try and do it once. So eventually I got 20 cameras on this set. It was probably at the time was kind of a record. So every angle was covered. We had 8 cameras stuck to the planes, 2 parachutists with cameras on and the rest on the floor. And what's great about the sequence, it's all real. And I think there's no CGI. You don't do 3 parachutes and make them into 3,000. You know? So there's great honesty about it. You know? So did that answer? Did that answer the question?
Yes.
Sure. To be honest. Does anyone have any water or anything at all? Let's cut the back or something to do. Oh, thanks. Thank you. I saw a hand go up. No, I've got this now, thanks.
Any more questions?
Do you miss working in film?
You gonna miss it? He's still working.
He's finished last month. He just got back from.
No, I did a film in Georgia just at the end of last year.
Yeah, so it's more for you then. Yeah.
When the phone stops going, you think I'm retired. So, no, I mean, I did 60 years. I've enjoyed the last few years helping younger filmmakers. I've worked on 2 or 3 scripts, in fact, still working on one now, or 2 now that maybe will be made, maybe not. But
In Cuba.
In Cuba, well, not in set in Cuba, not shot in Cuba. So it is after I think 60 years of getting up every morning at 6 o'clock in the morning and having all this stuff. I mean, it's probably one of the most exciting jobs you can do, in my opinion.
Yeah.
So If you're asking, do I miss it? I do miss it, but do I miss getting up at 5:30 in the morning and get back at 10 o'clock at night?
No.
All right, well, thank you very much, everybody. That was the last question.
So it sounds very similar to what I did on that day. I went up with a guy called James Floyd, who I think goes by Jawa James. I think it's Jawa James over on Twitter. We had a great time up there. Did you sign the book when you went to that small hut? Because if you had a flick back 12 months, you would have found my name in there.
No, didn't see a book in there. To be honest, when we went in each time, it was fairly busy in there. There were some parties of skiers who'd got in, so we didn't really spend much time in the hut.
Ah.
Went in, took a photo or two, because again, there's a behind-the-scenes image of some of the crew in a hut like that, and
Yep.
Peter Mayhew in his costume. I don't think it's actually that same hut. I think that was further up on the glacier.
It was further along, yeah. So actually, you brought back a lot of memories there. It's just such a relief, though, when you're coming off the glacier and you do see the hotel, and then also it just never seems to get any closer. It's over the next one. It's still the same distance away, and it reminds me of the Shining Hotel when you're coming back here tonight as well.
It's a long, long way across that lake, isn't it? Sorry, Jason.
Yeah, I was going to say, Rich, did you do the husky sledging when you were there?
Yeah, and it was utter rubbish. Honestly, the Huskies.
I did it in when I was at the Swedish ice hotel in Lapland. The one thing I remember about husky sledding was just the overall stink of the husky. That they absolutely stank.
They do.
The ones that's the one thing I remember. I remember the husky sledding, but the smell was just overpowering.
And they're dead lazy, very lazy. Anything that's flat or slight incline, you had to get off and push with 1 foot. You could walk quick on them. The snowshoes was a godsend, though. I think I did give you that tip. They were brilliant, absolutely brilliant. So you were there with Gus and Chris, so we may as well check in with those two now. I think Gus has been a few times, Chris's first time. Let's hear what they've got to say about it.
So this is Andy Preston for the Vintage Rebellion here at Visit Hoth 2020 in Finse, Norway. I'm here with Gus Lopez and Chris Georgilius. Hi guys.
Hey. Hey Andy. Thanks for having us.
No, it's good. Thank you for joining me. So you guys have been here all weekend. What are your thoughts of it?
I guess I'll go first. This is my first time. It's pretty amazing. As soon as we came through the last tunnel on the train, the trees were gone and it was Hoth. And it was just like I'd seen in the background photos, the behind the scenes photos, and the train station and the hotel. And it was zapped back in time, 40 years.
It's quite amazing, isn't it? And there's so little changed really.
Yeah,
from the filming.
It's a beautiful location, and I'd been here to the location before I'd not been to this event. But it's probably my favorite style of convention. It's just like diehard fans. It's a beautiful location where they filmed Empire Strikes Back, and it's just kind of a fun, right scale where you have access to the guests and. There's a lot of good mingling and interaction, so it's amazing. And I'd been wanting to come for a few years to this event, but this is the first time I've come to it, and I think I'll be back.
Yeah, it's my first as well. It's lovely that everything's so relaxed and informal, isn't it? And as you say, the guests are very happy to mingle with the punters and very chatty, lots of tales to tell.
Yeah,
absolutely.
And of course, all the filming locations, that's why they picked it. They're all very, very close to here, so all nicely accessible. A lot of them just around the hotel itself. When we arrived Friday afternoon, we went straight out on the lake, didn't we? We picked up a couple of locations.
Yeah, that was cool. Right off the train, go start looking for and people are surprised that an area like Finse it would be a reasonable one for location checking Star Wars locations but there's actually tons of reference with the mountains. Like the way the snow falls in the mountains is consistent every year. So it's actually, if the weather's good, not a bad place to go see Star Wars locations. You can find, people are surprised and think, oh, it's snow, it's just white backgrounds. It's like, no, it's much more than that. Most of the scenes in The Empire Strikes Back, you do see artifacts in the background that you can totally match.
A lot of the rocks are still there, aren't they? Distinctive rock formations that you can pick out and say, oh yeah, it must have been filmed from that angle. Chris, you went out on the dog sled yesterday.
We did go out on the dog sled. We thought we'd be adventurous. We had snowshoes and we walked to the Han Solo rock instead of taking the dog sled out, and we did our photos and all that. And then we took the dog sled back, so that was fun. Got to drive it. Gus and I got to drive 2 different dog sleds out of the 3, and it was enjoyable. My wife came in on one on her own to pick us up, and so it was great fun. It was a pretty amazing time.
Excellent. That Han Solo rock, that's still very distinctive, isn't it? I'm glad that it's pretty well marked. I don't think we'd have found it on our own, but
it is. It's nice that it was marked. Now, the first group in front of us, I think they were at a different rock. They didn't quite have it right, so we said, "Oh, it's this one over here." So once we transitioned everybody over, everybody took their photo ops.
Yeah, and like you say, Gus, you can pick it out. You can spot the backgrounds, the shape of the rocks, and you're there. You're where Harrison Ford was.
Yeah,
those years ago.
Yeah, the rock's still there. It's exactly the same. I mean, it's pretty awesome. I mean, for people that haven't visited Star Wars locations, it seems weird to those that don't understand it. But once you get out to them, you're really immersing yourself in the environment of the film. You know, it is very exciting for people really into these films, because it's like. And the other thing is, you guys were commenting on, like, once the train starts to get near Finse, the country changes, right? So you go from this alpine, lots of trees, to this is another planet. It just looks like the snow scenery, because there are no trees. It is just the rocks and the snow, and it really was brilliant location scouting for this place. And it's a great, even if as a tourist, even not into Star Wars, I think this is a wonderful location to visit in Norway.
It is a spectacular countryside. And lots of locations around the hotel. I mean, literally just out the door, there's places where they've shot Luke in the snow, and the Tauntaun scenes, and Snowspeeder just down on the lake, so everything is really here and accessible. But we're talking about Hoth. We're here in Finse. You guys are obviously great collectors. What are some of the highlights of your collections in terms of Hoth-related stuff, whether it's vintage, whether it's props? Chris, you got anything that you?
I got in terms of vintage, prop-wise, I have a claw from the Wappa costume. One of the first samples and one of the invoices, things that came from Stuart Freeborn.
Fantastic.
On the toy side, I have, from the micro collection, Hoth Wampa Cave, I have all the photo art used on the boxes. I have the sculpting for the Wampa figure, the micro figure, and it's about 8 inches tall, and several prototypes at that scale for that set. Some other printed proof sheets and things. So Hoth-wise, that's my little shrine, I guess.
Fantastic. Gus, you got any favourite Hoth pieces?
I mean, I've got a ton of them. Different ones. I mean, I like the crew jackets they had for the shooting in Finse. And there are actually 3 major styles of it. I've been able to pick up all 3. 2 of them are very obscure. One's like a press one, and one is an executive version of the jacket, in addition to the regular crew jacket. And so those are kind of fun.
They're so distinctive, aren't they? They're in all the photos. Just unmistakable.
Yeah, and then of course this must know, like Columbia issued a year and a half ago did a retro version of it, which I helped them loan them one of my originals to help them do that one. But yeah, I mean, I have other Hoth things. I have like a Snowspeeder pilot helmet from Empire Strikes Back, and I have concept art from the shooting here. So a bunch of things from Hoth. It's hard to pick one favorite actually, but I would say though they had some really the unique cast and crew stuff from here. Like for cast and crew collectors, the stuff from Finse is probably the pinnacle of like the items people are after.
Yeah, I would agree. I'd love to get my hands on one of those jackets one day. So that's great. We're going to go and do the tour of the hotel in a minute with some of the crew, camera crew, pointing out the locations. So we're looking forward to that. And then we're off this afternoon. Are you guys leaving tomorrow morning? I think, aren't you?
I leave late this afternoon.
Oh, you're going today?
Yeah.
I leave tomorrow.
But I fly out tomorrow.
Yeah. Well, safe journey back, and thank you very much for joining me.
Thanks for having us on.
Cheers. Thank you.
Thank you.
So awesome stuff then, Andy. So heading over to Sunday then, what was Sunday like?
Yes, Sunday, after a late night and a busy day, tiring day on the Saturday, got up a little bit later breakfast, chance to look around the hotel again. They've got a museum in the hotel with lots and lots of behind-the-scenes photos and little bits and pieces. There's a Hoth stormtrooper dressed up on a mannequin, so a good photo opportunity there. Some other little bits and pieces, so that was really good to have a look at. Again, looking at some of the filming locations and getting a few more shots with my action figures. Sunday was a very different day. As I say, we'd had really, really good weather on the Saturday until the snow came in later afternoon. But overnight on Saturday and then into Sunday, it was really snowy. In fact, it was great to see the two sides of Finse, because a lot of the Star Wars filming, certainly in the scenes with the Tauntauns and with Luke in the snow and the Wampa, were filmed in these blizzard conditions. So it was nice to see the snow blowing around and the wind whipping it up and the snowdrifts forming. We actually got to go out and about again on the Sunday. Christian Berham, who was the Norwegian crew guy, he led a tour around the hotel and the station. So we were sort of seeing different places that he was pointing out. He was sort of telling us tales of Harrison Ford turning up in the snow blower that they've got that goes along the railway line there, and turning up with a bottle of whiskey and having a very merry time on his way to the hotel, apparently. And again, going around showing where different scenes were filmed, talking about the experiences, keeping the cameras warm. There was one great story he told, actually, about the heated cover on one of the cameras, which was electric powered, worked off a long electricity cable which was plugged in the basement of the hotel, and they needed to keep this camera warm for the filming. They got everything ready, got the shot lined up, got the actors there. They were testing this camera. Is it warm? Putting the hand inside the jacket. Yeah, it's warm. Okay, we're good to go. Anyway, when it actually came to starting to turn over the cameras, starting to film, the camera didn't work. And they thought, what's going on here? Problem, camera is cold. Heated jacket's not working. So they traced the electricity cable back into the hotel, back into the basement where it was plugged in. And it turned out that one of the makeup ladies actually had decided she fancied a cup of tea. So she'd plugged her kettle in, she'd unplugged the camera, and it took them another half hour to get the camera warmed up again and get that shot ready. So I don't think she was very popular that day. That was a nice story from Christian. So after we'd finished that tour, really then it was time to check out, get our bags ready to go. Had another photo opportunity out the front of the hotels, doing some group photos and photos with some of the costumers. There were some guys there. There were, again, a couple of rebel soldiers. There was a biker scout, a Hoth stormtrooper, TIE pilot. So we got some nice photos with them. And then time to catch the train back. Very sad occasion. Really sorry to be going. It's such a magical place. But back on the train, another 4-hour journey back to Oslo, overnight in the hotel, and then fly home on the Monday morning. Just an absolutely fantastic trip. Love looking back through the photos and the video that we've took. Keeping in touch on Facebook with some of the friends that we've made over there. I think there's people that we're going to be in touch with for a long, long time. And as I think you found out yourself, Rich, a really special Star Wars experience from start to finish. Thoroughly recommend it to anybody.
The moon with the rebel base will be in range in 30 minutes.